English translation 230th contact, part 2. Wednesday, 11th October 1989, 0401 hours.
But now to your question about a future real summer. The next real summer, with high heat temperatures, you will have to wait another 14 years for that, because by a foresight in this respect, I know that the year 2003 will correspond to your wishes.
Europe groans under high temperatures. Heatwave breaks more records.
Europe is groaning under the tropical heat and its consequences. In Switzerland, the heat has broken more records. Falling temperatures in Portugal provided respite in the fight against the fires. Bern, Frankfurt, Lisbon. Switzerland experienced one of the hottest days of this exceptional summer yesterday. The heat even deformed a railway track in the canton of Zug. As a result, the railway line between Cham and Rotkreuz was interrupted. The temperature ranged from 33 to 35 degrees, with 34.0 degrees in Zurich-Kloten. In Sion, a new absolute heat record was set at 37.2 degrees. The only hotter day so far this year was on the 20th of July in Geneva, with 37.8 degrees. Switzerland's absolute heat record of 39 degrees in Basel on the 2nd of July 1952 remains unmatched. Record temperatures were also recorded in the rivers. In the Broye in Payerne, the Swiss National Hydrology Service measured a new record of 27 degrees. The risk of forest fires remains high. According to the Federal Forestry Directorate, it is the highest it has been for almost 30 years. In Portugal, the fire brigade managed to bring almost all fires under control, according to the National Coordination Center. However, firefighters braced themselves for the possibility that a renewed rise in temperatures could rekindle the fires. Meanwhile, the death toll rose to 11. The fires, some of which have been raging for 10 days, have destroyed about 54,000 hectares of forest. The Portuguese government had declared a state of disaster on Monday. In Spain, too, the fight against the forest fires continued in several provinces. 200 people were evacuated from a village in the province of Burgos. In Extremadura in the southwest, there were 11 fires, 6 of which were classified as serious. So far, 13 people have fallen victim to the persistent heat wave. 30 degrees in London. The heat wave also spilled over into Great Britain at the beginning of the week. Totally untypical temperatures of 30 degrees in London and Manchester disrupted public life. Network Rail, the operator of Britain's railway lines, imposed a speed limit of 95 kilometers per hour on all lines for fear of track deformation. Hundreds of trains were cancelled. Today, Wednesday, 38 degrees could be reached in southern England, the highest temperature ever recorded in the kingdom. The previous record of 37.2 degrees dates back to 1990. The blisteringly hot summer weather also drove temperatures in southwest France to new records. According to Météo France, the mercury in Toulouse climbed to 40.7 degrees Celsius in the shade on Monday. Monday was thus the hottest day in the southwest since the end of the war. In Paris, temperatures of almost 40 degrees were measured again. There, people crowded the banks of the Seine, which were transformed into a long beach with white sand, deck chairs, and palm trees. The heat can also be felt in Italy. Not only does it make Italians sweat, but it also makes them come up with cool ideas. For example, many pre-cooled their pillows and pajamas in the fridge, observed the Milanese newspaper Corriere della Sera. At 54 degrees in the Palace of Justice in Genoa, the employees could no longer stand it at their desks. There was a protest action, which was also joined by the judges. The demand? Quick installation of air conditioning. The heat record of 40 degrees expected in Germany has already been exceeded in the street canyons of many big cities. According to a meteorologist, warm air bubbles rising from the asphalt can reach well over 60 degrees Celsius. An end to the heat wave is not yet in sight in Germany either. Due to the stable high-pressure situation, meteorologists expect the hot days with more than 30 degrees to continue at least until the middle of next week. And
Der Landbote Wintertour, Wednesday, 6th August 2003.
$35,000 heat victims.
Brussels. The August heat wave killed at least 35,000 people in 8 European countries alone, according to new calculations. Scientists predict even hotter summers in the future.
20 minutes, Zurich, Friday, 14th October 2003.
Feverish fight against forest fires in Portugal, state of disaster declared.
Nearly 3,000 Portuguese firefighters continued to battle feverishly yesterday against the most devastating forest fires in decades. The government in Lisbon declared a state of disaster. Lisbon, Moscow. The more than 70 fires have destroyed some 54,000 hectares of forest since the 28th of July, according to forestry authorities' estimates, and at least 9 people have died. Prime Minister José Durão Barroso spoke of a dramatic situation after an emergency cabinet meeting. The fires were triggered by absolutely exceptional weather conditions, so we have to respond with exceptional measures, Barroso said. His government has come under criticism for its handling of the crisis and faces accusations of not having reacted quickly enough, among other things. The government has promised financial aid of more than €110 million, 165 million francs, to those affected. Among other things, this money is to be used to rebuild infrastructure and benefit farmers who lost their crops in the fires. Dozens of houses and shops burned down in remote villages, many of them without water supply and telephone. Durão Barroso said no one could remember such a fire disaster. The authorities assume that most of the fires were started intentionally. In the center and north of the country in particular, dense eucalyptus and pine forests are on fire, some of which have been burning for a week. Strong winds and a persistent heat wave have fanned the flames further, complicating firefighting efforts. For the coming week, temperatures, which have already exceeded the 40-degree mark, are forecast to rise even further. The worst-hit area is the central Portuguese town of Castelo Branco, 200 kilometers northeast of Lisbon. The declaration of a state of emergency opens up new possibilities for the fire brigade in its fight against the devastating fires. For example, the emergency services can make use of public buildings and vehicles. Nearly 400 soldiers, 780 firefighting vehicles, and dozens of helicopters and planes have been sent to support the firefighters, some of them from Spain, Italy, and Morocco, according to a spokesman for the National Coordination Center. Ease in Spain, the situation eased. Fires blazed mainly in the regions of Extremadura, Andalusia, and Castilla-La Mancha. More than 12,000 hectares of forest, scrubland, and fields burned down. In the central province of Ciudad Real alone, 7,000 hectares burned. Forest and bushfires are also raging in the European northwest of Russia and in Canada. Western Canada is experiencing the worst forest fires in well over half a century. The 350 fires in the province of British Columbia and neighbouring Alberta were further fuelled yesterday by winds of up to 50 kilometres per hour. A total of about 11,000 people were evacuated in both provinces. In addition to more than 54,000 hectares of forest, over 130 buildings also burned to the ground. In Russia, the forest is on fire in more than 500 places. According to the responsible ministry, the focus of the fires shifted to the European northwest of the country, to Karelia, Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. Ag.
Der Landbote, Wintertour, Tuesday, 5th August 2003.
When fire leaps over the rivers in Portugal, forest fires have claimed 3 more lives. By Peter Burgart.
Madrid. The entire disaster can only be grasped from space. For days, Portugal's television has been providing satellite images on which the otherwise green country is covered with red spots and gray areas. Some illustrate the more than 70 sources of fire in 15 of the 18 provinces that have devoured at least 54,000 hectares of eucalyptus and pine forests in 1.5 weeks. The others are huge walls of smoke that obscure the blue sky despite the constant sunshine. It is a national disaster, and on Monday the government declared a state of emergency. And among the people, tragedies are raging. Our city is burning. On Tuesday morning, more deaths were reported. A woman died in Ceuta and a man in Oleiros, bringing the death toll to 11. Some communities were in the meantime expecting the worst. Our district threatens to become a desert, warned the mayor of the small town of Oleiros, in the vicinity of which 30 villages had to be evacuated. If no help comes, our whole town will burn, cried his colleague from Macau, where residents had to hold wet cloths over their faces to protect themselves from the smoke. Telephone and power supply also failed in many places. In the border area, the fire roller had rolled all the way to Spain. Who would have thought that the fire would jump the rivers? Lamented a resident of Valencia de Alcántara near Cáceres, where the magical Jola amusement park with its chestnut trees was destroyed. A heavenly intervention yearns a pilot. The only solution is for the weather to change soon. It doesn't look like it will, with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees in many places yesterday as well. In addition, meteorologists fear more dry thunderstorms that send lightning but no rain. Greatest forest fire danger in almost 30 years burn. The forest fire danger in Switzerland is greater than in the record-breaking year of 1981, when 153 fires destroyed 1,137 hectares of forest. The danger could even worsen because the trees are losing their leaves prematurely. Then there is tinder on the ground, said an employee of the Federal Forestry Directorate on request. In the Grisons alone, 30 mostly smaller fires have already broken out this summer. One of them has been smoldering for weeks in the Calanca Valley. Eels are dying in the Rhine. The current high water temperatures in the Rhine and Untersee have triggered an eel mortality. It is not yet possible to say how many fish have died. What is clear is that practically all of the eels that died were infected by the swimbladder worm and bacteria. These are always present, says Roman Kistler, head of the Thurgau Hunting and Fisheries Department. At present, however, the high water temperature in the shallow Untersee favors their spread. At the same time, the high water temperature is stressing the eels. It is probably the combination of the 3 factors that has triggered the mortality. In addition to eels, grayling and trout are also suffering from a lack of oxygen in the Untersee and Rhine. The first dead graylings have already been found. Appius Day.
Tagesanzeiger Zurich, Wednesday, 6th August 2003.
Food collection drought holidays for cows.
Brunnen-Settend farmers in central Switzerland are collecting cattle feed for their colleagues in the Central Plateau who are in need due to the ongoing drought. In addition, they are inviting cows from the dry areas to the alpine pastures for drought holidays. The fodder collection campaign was decided last week by the Central Switzerland Farmers Union ZBB. The Solidarity campaign is intended to help those who are in need through no fault of their own. The valley areas have also always helped us in such situations, said ZBB Secretary Franz Philippe. Silo bales and hay will be collected and made available at cost price to the farms in the cantons of Aargau, Baseland, and Solothurn, most affected by the drought. The supply of fodder is one thing, but the cattle from the arid regions can also eat their fill directly on the still green pastures in central Switzerland. Cattle from the Basel region are already on drought holidays on the Nidwalden Alps.
Der Landbote, Winterthur, Tuesday, 5th August 2003.
Forest fires, new fires caused by lightning.
Lisbon, Vancouver. After the devastating forest fires in Portugal, the manhunt for arsonists is in full swing. In the area in central Portugal most affected by the fires, 25 suspects have been caught so far. Italy and Spain are also searching for culprits. In Canada and Croatia, new fires were started by lightning. In the Canadian province of British Columbia, firefighters are meanwhile battling 366 forest fires. Already 38,000 hectares of forest have fallen prey to the flames. Provincial Premier Gordon Campbell said the fire had left no life in the area. In the neighboring province of Alberta, the situation has improved somewhat. 1,000 residents of the village of Hillcrest in southwestern Alberta have been able to return to their homes. Thousands of evacuated Canadians, however, must continue to be patient. A lightning strike also triggered a large fire on the Croatian peninsula of Istria. Several hundred firefighters, soldiers, and volunteers were deployed with firefighting aircraft and ships. On the Adriatic coast, on the other hand, several fires were brought under control. Also in Russia, the number of forest fires decreased from over 500 to 445. Across the country, 6,800 firefighters were in action, the civil defense in Moscow announced.
Der Landbote, Winterthur, Friday, 8th August 2003.
Heat might be a problem for SBB.
The heat deformed the railway track between Cham and Rotkreuz. The SBB Lucerne-Zurich line was interrupted. Lucerne. According to an SBB statement, the track warp occurred on Tuesday on the only single-track section between Rotkreuz and Zug, about 400 meters past Rotkreuz station. There, the track is bent over a length of about 50 meters. Tracks are being cooled. The repair work lasted until at least Wednesday night. For the time being, the track was cooled with water over a length of about 200 meters. It may have to be cut open. In any case, the track will have to be filled again. The hourly inter-Arcegio trains Lucerne-Zurich Airport were routed via Heidersberg-Muri to Rotkreuz and only ran to and from Zurich main station. The Zurich-Lucerne journey time was extended by around 20 minutes. Passengers traveling to the airport had to change trains in Zurich. The half-hourly Interregio trains ran from Lucerne only to Rotkreuz and from Zurich only to Zug. Buses were used on the Zug-Rotkreuz route. It is extremely rare for a track to deform because of high temperatures, said SBB spokesman Jacques Zuloff. The rails are manufactured in such a way that they can withstand extreme temperatures, be it cold or heat. In addition, a locomotive driver notices immediately when a track is deformed because of his driving behavior. The people responsible for rail maintenance also carry out regular checks. Due to the intense heat of the past months, this is currently being done daily on the entire network, said Zuloff. According to the SBB, this summer was the first time that the heat deformed a railway track. The tolerance limit for deformation is 1.5 centimeters. The track at Rotkreuz, however, was pressed outwards by up to 2 centimeters. Sauna in the train compartment. Because the outside temperatures rise above 35 degrees, non-air-conditioned train carriages sometimes become saunas. Unfortunately, there is little that can be done about this, said SBB spokesman Ruedi Zuloff. There are no halls to park all the carriages in the shade. The only solution is to open the windows to ventilate the wagons. Cooling them with water is far too dangerous because of the electrical installations. SDATA.
Tagesanzeiger Zurich Monday, 25th August 2003.
Flame hollows in Canada, tens of thousands fleeing.
Devastating wildfires in Western Canada have sent tens of thousands of human beings fleeing. Kelowna. Canadian authorities said the wildfires were the worst in 50 years. In the Pacific province of British Columbia, more than 20,000 residents of the city of Kelowna and its surroundings were forced to flee to safety from the flames on Saturday night. In total, around 30,000 people had to flee their homes within 2 days. The human beings in and around Kelowna, a city of 100,000 inhabitants located around 300 kilometers east of Vancouver, often had only a few minutes to leave their homes. The fires had become huge conflagrations, further fueled by the wind. Flames up to 130 meters high had been eating through the forest at a rate of nearly 100 meters per minute, a spokeswoman for the emergency services said. Last Friday night alone, the blaze destroyed about 170 square kilometers of forest and scrubland in the hills near the city. Hundreds of houses were destroyed by the fires. The fires in Canada's Pacific province were triggered by a lightning strike the Saturday before last. Firefighters also had to battle the flames in the western USA. In the state of Oregon, where 1,500 campers and residents had already fled the fires, the governor had a state of emergency declared on Friday evening. SDA.
Der Landbote. Wintertour. Monday, 25th August 2003.
Forest fires devastation.
Kamloops. Forest fires in Canada are ravaging more and more tourist destinations. More than 300 forest fires are raging in Alberta and British Columbia in Western Canada, and the provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba are also affected. Around Kamloops alone, about 300 kilometers northeast of Vancouver, the flames have burned nearly 40,000 hectares of land and destroyed dozens of homes in the last 2 weeks, according to authorities. More than 10,000 human beings had to be evacuated, according to authorities. Strong wind gusts continued to fuel the worst wildfires in Western Canada in half a century. Wildfires also continue to rage across the Canadian border. However, cooler weather set in on Monday, with light rain somewhat slowing several fires in the state of Montana. Okay.
Der Landbote, Wintertour, Wednesday, 6th August 2003.
3,000 heat deaths.
Paris. French experts speak of a national catastrophe. Already, 3,000 human beings have died as a result of the sweltering heat. The hospitals are overcrowded. Cooling tents have to serve as mortuaries. Prime Minister Jean-Pierre Raffarin broke off his holidays and put an emergency plan for the hospitals into effect. Hot Lake Constance, oh. The Swabian Sea has never been so hot. In the middle of the lake, 26.1 degrees were measured at a depth of 1 meter. Peak value so far from 1976, 0.24 degrees. Forest fires, Lisbon. Forests are still burning in southwestern Europe. In Portugal, thousands of human beings are still threatened by the flames. In Spain and on Sardinia, new fires ignited. Drought aid for farmers. Brussels. Because of the devastating drought across Europe, the EU Commission is considering paying out agricultural aid ahead of schedule. Thus, part of the direct aid for cereals could be brought forward from November to October. More expensive vegetables. Burn. The drought is particularly hard on Swiss vegetables. Producers are expecting harvest losses of up to 60%. And various types of vegetables are becoming more expensive because they have to be additionally irrigated.
Blick, Zurich, Friday, 15th August 2003.
Bad weather.
The storm swept across Switzerland at 140 kilometers per hour, Bern. It was a storm that brought the long-awaited rain, but also swept destructively across Switzerland at 140 kilometers per hour. On Sunday evening, damage was caused to 100 buildings in the canton of Bern alone. In Dompierre-VD, a person was injured by a falling branch. In Herkingen-Esso, a car driver collided with a branch lying on the ground. The driver and his passenger were slightly injured. In Geneva, the fire brigade was called out 100 times and several boats were in distress. There were delays at the SBB.
Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 19th August 2003.
An estimated 500 to 1,000 human beings have fallen victim to the heat wave in the Netherlands over the past 3 months, according to the Dutch Statistics Office. Each degree above normal summer temperatures is thought to have claimed the lives of 25 sick and weak human beings per week, it said.
Der Landbote, Wintertour, Friday, 22nd August 2003.
Thousands fled from the flames.
Madrid, Karabük, Zagreb. Several forest fires caused devastation in Spain, France, Croatia, Romania, and on the Turkish Black Sea coast over the weekend. On the Costa Brava, more than 12,000 inhabitants and tourists were temporarily brought to safety by the fire brigade. 17 housing estates, 4 campsites and apartment complexes in the area around the seaside resort of Plaça d'Aro were evacuated as a precaution. A water park and a shopping center were also evacuated. Several human beings suffered minor smoke inhalation, the authorities said. After the fire brigade was able to bring the fire under control, those affected were allowed to return to their homes on Sunday evening. The authorities assumed that the fire was caused by arson. Campgrounds evacuated in the Mours Massif in southern France. More than 1,000 firefighters battled new devastating forest fires on Sunday. Several campsites and holiday resorts were evacuated as a precaution. A tourist from Italy died while fleeing the flames of a forest fire on the Italian island of Elba. According to television reports, the woman and her family were loading their car when flames fanned by the wind suddenly shot towards them. In the Turkish Black Sea province of Karabukh, some 500 hectares of forest and mountain land burned. In Romania, more than 100 fires broke out in the forests of southern Carpathia. Firefighters and aid workers dug aisles in the impassable terrain to fight the flames. SDA.
Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, Monday, 1st September 2003.
The forests are still burning.
STA. Maria Giara Giumaglio, T. Tirelessly, the firefighters in Ticino and Graubünden's Calanca Valley are fighting the forest fires. With helicopters and tons of water. To no avail. It continues to burn. 90 hectares of meadow. Forest and bushes have already been destroyed by the fire. 60 of them in the Maggia Valley above Sonteo, where the flames have been raging for a week. It was triggered by a lightning strike. Fighting is also going on in the Calanca Valley in Graubünden. 30 hectares of forest are on fire here. The fire cannot be extinguished without heavy rainfall, says a spokeswoman for the cantonal police. The firefighters' main concern is to prevent the fire from spreading further. The danger of forest fires is also great in the rest of Switzerland. Also, the canton of Uri has now issued a fire ban for forests and Her. On Lake Constance, the water level dropped by 8 centimeters in 1 week. And because the shallow water warms up faster, masses of grayling and eel have died in the Rhine.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 13th August 2003.
Devastating bushfire in nature reserve.
The extreme drought has led to several forest fires in Switzerland. The fire brigades are in large-scale operation. Bern. The fires affected the cantons of Ticino, Grisons, Solothurn, Schwyz, Bem, and Vaud. A bushfire on Sunday evening in the Vaud Nature Reserve, Les Grangettes, caused particularly high ecological damage. According to police estimates, between 2,000 and 3,000 square meters of bushes and reeds burnt in the fire. The Cantonal Nature Conservation Service estimated the area burnt at around 15,000 square meters. Due to the great biodiversity in the area, the fire caused considerable damage. Especially rare dragonfly species became victims of the flames. However, the damage is not irreversible, as Philippe Gmour from the Vaudois Nature Conservation Service said on request. The birds had been able to save themselves, the affected insect populations had not been completely destroyed, and the burnt bushes and reeds would recover. According to initial findings, the fire is due to carelessness. According to police, the fire developed from 2 different fireplaces. Ash continues to smolder under earth. For 6 days now, firefighters have been trying to extinguish a forest and bush fire in Ticino's Maggia Valley in the mountains above the municipality of Somio. The impassable, stony and dry terrain, as well as the strong wind, make the extinguishing work difficult. On Monday, 3 Army Super Puma helicopters, 3 private helicopters, and 25 firefighters were deployed. So far, it has been possible to protect the lower areas of the valley from the flames, according to a statement. However, the situation at higher altitudes, where the ash often continues to glow underground, is causing headaches. As soon as the water dropped by the helicopters evaporates, the flames spread again, fanned by the wind. So far, an area of about 30 hectares has been destroyed. The cause of the fire is suspected to be a lightning strike. A forest fire has also been raging in the Kalanka Valley near Sta Maria in southern Grisons since Sunday evening. The fire had broken out due to the sweltering heat. A total of 20 hectares of forest in the difficult-to-access area of Pids de Renten are affected. The fire brigade tried to prevent the fire from spreading with 3 Super Puma and 2 private helicopters. Fire after car accident. In the canton of Solothurn, a traffic accident triggered a forest fire on Sunday evening. The leaking petrol ignited on the overheated exhaust system and set fire to a wooden fig tree. About 2 acres of commercial forest became victims of the flames. The fire brigade was on duty until Monday morning. A forest fire on the northern shore of Lake Thun was mild. Presumably as a result of construction work on a rockfall net, the forest floor and individual trees had caught fire on an area of about 200 square meters. The fire was extinguished by helicopter. A forest fire broke out in Grossi-Eszid near Einsiedeln on Monday night. The undergrowth caught fire over an area of about 60 square meters. The fire brigade was able to extinguish the fire. SD8.
Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, Tuesday, 12th August 2003.
Italy, Majorca and France most affected forest fires and storms in the south.
Ram Palma de Mallorca. A firefighter has died fighting a forest fire in Italy. Meanwhile, on the Spanish island of Majorca, violent storms with hailstorms caused millions of dollars worth of damage. In northern Italy, a 46-year-old member of a volunteer fire brigade died when he fell into a 20-meter deep ravine while fighting a fire at Lake Iseo, Italian media reported on Wednesday. Hundreds of forest fires have broken out in Italy in recent weeks. According to the authorities, arsonists are responsible for many of the fires. Already on Monday, 3 firefighters were killed in the Mours Massif in southern France when their fire engine was trapped by flames. The forests also continue to burn on the Var between Cogelin and Grimaud. Storms over Mallorca. While forests continue to burn in Italy, the Spanish island of Mallorca has been hit by severe storms after months of heat. The area around Costatex in the center was particularly affected, the local press reported. There, fist-sized hailstones damaged hundreds of cars and smashed through numerous roofs. "We have never experienced anything like this before," said one person affected. "It was like a bombardment." The storm also had its good side. For the first time since the end of July, temperatures dropped below the 30-degree mark. Mallorca and the other Balearic Islands have experienced the hottest August this year since weather records began in 1865.
Der Landbote, Wintertour, Thursday, 4th September 2003.
Forest fires in Spain.
Madrid. Forest fires broke out again yesterday near the Spanish tourist resorts of Playa d'Aro and Calonge. More than 6,000 residents and holidaymakers from housing estates, apartment complexes, and campsites had to be evacuated. According to the authorities, they were accommodated in a large sports stadium.
Blick, Zurich, Saturday, 30th August 2003.
$13,600 human beings died due to the heat.
Many more human beings have died from the heat in France than the government estimates. This is according to the largest funeral home.
Paris. This month, 13,600 more human beings are likely to die nationwide than in August last year, the largest funeral home, OGF, said on Wednesday.
Prime Minister Jean-Pierre Raffarin, who has come under criticism, warned that such estimates should be treated with caution out of respect for those affected. He said that reliable figures would be available in a month at the latest. So far, the government assumes up to 5,000 heat-related deaths. In the Greater Paris area alone, the number of deaths rose by a good 3,400 in August, explained the company OGF, which, according to its own information, organizes every fourth funeral. A spokeswoman explained that the deaths in the first 3 weeks of August were extrapolated to the entire month and then multiplied by 4. The mayor of Paris, Bertrand Delanoë, announced that 836 more persons had died in the French capital from the 1st to the 18th of August than in the same period last year. This corresponds to a 131% increase in the mortality rate. Criteria of heat death. The Association of Hospital Emergency Physicians, AMAF, said the official number of heat deaths is likely to be much lower than the new estimate and is unlikely to reflect reality. This is because the criteria used to determine a heat death are very restrictive, said AMAF Secretary General Frederick Payne. According to medical experts, many elderly people are so weakened by the heat that an increased mortality rate is to be expected in the near future. There are too few nursing staff. The chairman of the Association of Nursing Home Directors, Pascal Chanvert, told François, "Thousands of old human beings have died because there are not enough staff in the homes and for home care." He called for a Marshall Plan for old people's homes. In Germany and Switzerland, he said, there were 3 times as many staff. Doctors' associations and the opposition criticized that the government had acted far too late. President Jacques Chirac, after his return from holidays, demanded a report from several ministers for today's first cabinet meeting after the summer break. In Italy, there are no figures, Rome. In view of the many heat deaths, the Italian consumer protection organization Codacons has called for an investigation by the government. The number of deaths in Italy is probably close to the official number of victims in France, Codacons said on Wednesday. The health ministry in Rome, however, has not released figures, saying it was impossible to determine how many human beings had actually died as a result of the high temperatures. AP.
Tagesanzeiger Zurich, Thursday, 21st August 2003.
Major damage after new forest fires in southern Europe.
Another arson on the Costa Brava. New forest fires have caused devastation in Spain, Italy, France, Croatia, Romania, and Turkey. Girona. On the Costa Brava, more than 12,000 residents and tourists were temporarily taken to safety by firefighters. 17 housing estates, 4 campsites and apartment complexes near the seaside resort of Platja d'Aro were evacuated. Several human beings suffered smoke inhalation. Since the fire brigade had the fire under control, those affected were allowed to return to their homes yesterday. The authorities assume that the fire was caused by arson. A fire near Valencia ate through 200 hectares of undergrowth. A fire was also active near Benissa on the Costa Bianca. Fleeing the flames of a forest fire, a tourist from Italy died yesterday on the island of Elba. Fires also occurred on the Italian mainland, Sicily, and Sardinia. In the Moors Massif in southern France, 800 firefighters battled the blaze. Rescue workers evacuated 2 campsites and a holiday settlement near La Garde Freinet near Saint-Tropez as a precaution. In the Turkish province of Karabakh, 500 hectares of forest and mountain land burned. In Croatia, flames destroyed 7 abandoned houses and 400 hectares of scrubland and pine forests. In Romania, more than 100 fires broke out in the southern Carpathians. Sta.
Der Landbote. Wintertour. Monday, 1st September 2003.
Glacier melting, torrential rainfall, water shortages, electrical energy shortages, mountain slides, landslides, mudslides, droughts, heat deaths, enormous storms and tempests, as well as floods, will also cause a great deal of calamity worldwide, which will also be the case for Europe and again, also for Switzerland.
Landslides and floods in the Philippines. Rains bring devastation.
Manila. Landslides and floods in the Philippines are believed to have claimed the lives of well over 300 human beings. Helpers recovered 184 bodies by Monday. In the particularly hard-hit province of southern Leyte in the center of the country alone, at least 117 inhabitants were missing, according to the Philippine Disaster Management Agency. More than 20,000 human beings fled from the floods and mudslides to emergency shelters. According to the authorities, there is little hope of rescue for those buried under tons of earth and rubble. Relatives have called for the rescue work to be suspended. The villages buried under mud are to be declared cemeteries. In the meantime, fear of disease spread in the disaster areas. For aid deliveries reached the villages only with difficulty due to bad weather and blocked roads. Storms hampered rescue helicopters. Trucks got stuck on the roads, said Defense Minister Eduardo Ermita. Authorities appealed for donations of food, medicine, blankets, clothes, milk, and also toys. We want Christmas to be a little less sad for the children, said Social Affairs Minister Corazon Soliman. The landslides had buried entire villages in the central and southern Philippines after days of rain. President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo blamed the disaster on ongoing illegal logging in the affected regions. The trees could no longer hold back the water masses. Since yesterday, no trace has been found of a ferry with 75 human beings on board. The crew of the Pieri had sent a distress call on Sunday on its way to Brooks Point on Palawan. The ship was said to be leaking. Der
Landbote. Wintertour. Tuesday, 23rd December 2003.
Great flood in Mexico.
As the AFP depot. At least 50 human beings have died in heavy flooding following heavy rains in northern Mexico. Around 40 more residents of the state of Coahuila on the border with the USA are still missing. This was announced on Monday evening by the head of the Civil Protection Authority, Sergio Robles, in Piedras Negras, around 1,000 kilometers north of the capital Mexico City. About 3,500 human beings had to leave their homes. We have never experienced anything like this here. As you know, this is a desert state, said Governor Enrique Martinez on Mexican television. The most important thing now was to help the human beings quickly. Numerous towns and villages were up to 50 centimeters underwater after the Rio Escondido swelled to unprecedented strength and overflowed its banks in a very short time, following sudden heavy rainfall on Sunday evening local time. The Escondido flows into the Rio Bravo, which forms the border between Mexico and the USA.
Zürcher Oberländer. Wetzikon. Wednesday, 7th April 2004.
Aha, nice. Then I just wait until then. But concerning the forest fires, etc., of course, in many cases, criminals or careless and deliberate ones consciously commit crimes. For example, with regard to the fact that houses and roads, etc., are built in areas that are endangered by avalanches, which causes great damage and many deaths when avalanches go down. Also, many conflagrations are probably initiated by human beings to inflict damage on others, to cheat insurance companies, or for commercial reasons. Many forest fires are therefore not merely triggered by droughts, overheating, water droplet lens effect, or burning glass effect, as well as lightning strikes, but in many cases by inattention, audacity, confusion, negligence, recklessness, carelessness, lack of caution, as well as by conscious, firmly preconsidered decisiveness of malicious kind, negligence, or by pathological craving for revenge of irresponsible persons, by pathological pyromania, or by criminal arson for commercial reasons.
The summer ended in a flash.
Accompanied by rain and thunderstorms, the first autumn storms swept across Switzerland. In Ticino, landslides caused traffic chaos. By Ursina Trautmann, Lugano's southern Switzerland was temporarily accessible only by rail on Friday. All road connections were interrupted. On the Gotthard route, several ruptures hit the motorway and cantonal road at the same time. The A2 was buried near Giornico at 10 hours and remained closed until the afternoon. No one was injured. On the San Bernardino route, rockfall impeded the passage to the south. Rivers and streams overflowed their banks in several places in Ticino. Police advised the population to stay away from bridges and watercourses. These can rise unexpectedly, officials warned. Numerous roads in Ticino's side valleys were still impassable in the afternoon. The Blenio Valley, in particular, was badly affected by the rainfall. With 180 litres of rain per square metre, the measuring station in the valley recorded more precipitation than normally during an entire month. Numerous streams burst their banks in the valley. Inhabited areas were threatened by landslides. Several houses near Motto had to be evacuated. In the evening, most residents were able to return home. Involuntary helicopter flight. A worker who was working with an excavator near a stream bed above Malvalia in the Blenio Valley was swept away by the debris masses of the stream and has been missing since then. The search for him had to be interrupted in the afternoon for safety reasons. The fire brigade also brought 13 persons from a campsite to safety in the rooms of the Dongio Civil Defense. In addition, 33 elderly holidaymakers from the Czech Republic took an involuntary helicopter ride. Their bus had got stuck between two gullies in the Blenio Valley near Lotinja.
The bus could neither move forwards nor backwards, so the pensioners had to be airlifted to safety.
A mother with 2 children was lucky near Sonogno in the Verzasca Valley. The 3 of them were able to leave their car before it was swept into the depths by a landslide. They found shelter in a rustico. In the Locarno area, violent gusts of wind uprooted several trees. In Bellinzonese, the fire brigade went out to pump out cellars. According to the police, around 190 persons were deployed throughout the canton of Ticino. Transit traffic remained severely impeded throughout the day. In the Bellinzona area, on the Bernardino route, and when entering Switzerland, long queues formed until the evening. Heavy traffic was stopped in Uri and Chiasso. In the evening, the A2 was only passable on one side in the northbound direction. Romandi, roof on railway line. In Graubünden, The A13 over the San Bernardino was reopened in the early afternoon after a total closure for 1.5 hours. A landslide had buried the roadway near Meadows after a thunderstorm. Major flooding with high property damage occurred in the municipality of Valls, GR. There, the Peelback overflowed its banks and flooded cellars and garages. Some 20 persons had to be evacuated temporarily. The railway line between Geneva and Lausanne was also affected. No trains were able to run on Friday night because parts of a roof near Rennes Vaidi were carried away and fell onto the tracks. The storm also caused over £1 million worth of damage in the Lake Constance region. Boats, chairs and tables were whirled meters high through the air. Jetties were displaced up to 10 meters.
Tagesanzeiger Zurich, Tuesday, 30th August 2003.
After the fire hell, a hailstorm in California.
Los Angeles. Scenes like the depths of winter. The hailstones form a kind of snow carpet on the streets of L.A. Rain, like from buckets. Hailstorms and floods. A violent thunderstorm hit California, where the fire hell had recently been raging. The next day, it looked like a winter sports area in some places. But severe storms also swept across the eastern United States and the Midwest. Even Air Force One, George W. Bush's presidential plane, ran into turbulence on its return flight from Florida when it landed in Washington. So much so, in fact, that some people on board felt sick. Storm gusts with speeds of up to 120 kilometers per hour uprooted trees, blew semi-trucks across the roads like toy cars, and knocked down power poles. More than 1.4 million households had no electricity. Thousands of families were left in the dark for several hours. 2 human beings lost their lives due to the storms. Even in Puerto Rico and the neighboring Virgin Islands felt the torrential downpours. The governor of the island of Puerto Rico, which belongs to the USA, declared a state of emergency in 4 localities.
Blick, Zurich, Saturday, 15th November 2003.
Summer 2003 was only a precursor.
ETH researchers predict far hotter summers than the one in 2003 for the end of the century. Zurich. According to a statement by ETH Zurich, the past record summer has caused climate researchers some headaches. The high temperatures did not fit into the existing climate records and could not be classified in the long-term observations. Scientists from the ETH Institute for Atmospheric and Climate Science in Meteo, Switzerland, have now published a possible explanation in the scientific journal Nature. The basic assumption of the researchers is that the exceptional conditions of the past summer can be attributed to the increase in climate fluctuations. Not only are average temperatures rising, but fluctuations around the mean are also increasing, they say. This increases the probability of extremely hot summers. The model calculations have shown that between 2071 and 2100, about every second summer should be as warm or warmer than that of 2003. The researchers also assume that the greenhouse gas concentration will double compared to today's level. The warming will not take place evenly, however, the researchers note. There will continue to be cool and rainy summers. The study also points to problems arising from the more extreme temperatures and lower rainfall. Agricultural businesses or users of hydropower would face major problems in view of the increasing variability of the summer climate. AP
Tagesanzeiger Zurich, Monday, 12th January 2004.
Summer heat cost 50,000 Grayling their lives.
Only a small percentage of grayling in the Rhine survived the summer. Stein am Rhein. The past hot summer has severely damaged the fish population in the Rhine. An estimated 50,000 graylings perished due to the high water temperatures, according to the hunting and fishing authorities of the cantons of Thurgau and Schaffhausen. A fishing ban is in force for grayling until the end of January 2004. According to the authorities, initial surveys of the extent of the damage were only possible when the water temperatures dropped. Stock checks with the net at Stein am Rhein SH showed just 3.3% of the catches that had been made on average in the years 1993 to 2002 in the same season and with the same fishing effort. In Dasenhofen TG2, the results were sobering. Despite a major effort by 14 experienced fishermen, not a single grayling was caught this year. The authorities conclude that only a small percentage of the once thriving grayling population in the Rhine has survived. They also say that hopes that this year's stock had at least escaped disaster were not borne out. The grayling is not extinct, but it will take years for the stock to return to its usual strength, a fisheries supervisor said. AP.
Tagesanzeiger Zurich, Tuesday, 23rd December 2003.
The weather in October, the coldest October for 30 years.
Weck, October was too cold, very wet, and a little too dull. After a warm start to the month, temperatures were almost consistently below the seasonal norm until the end of the month, especially in the second half. The first third of the month was mainly characterized by low pressure. From the 10th to the 19th, Central Europe was under the influence of a stable high-pressure system centered over Northern Europe. The last third of the month was characterized by pre-winter conditions. In the night of the 24th, winter advanced into the Reichland with snowfall, and above the snow cover, the lowest October temperatures since the beginning of measurements were recorded at numerous measuring sites. Cold record in La Brevine. The largest temperature deficits of 2.5 to 3.5 degrees were recorded in the Jura, the foothills of the Jura, northeastern Switzerland, and the Alps. In the central and western Midlands, in the Valais Mountains, in the Gotthard region, and in most areas of Graubünden, the heat deficit was 2 to 2.5 degrees. In central Valais, in the Föhn areas, and in the southern valleys of Graubünden, the negative deviations were I to 2 degrees. The southern Ticino benefited on individual days from the mild northern Föhn and recorded a deficit of only a few tenths of a degree. In the dry, high-level cold air above the snow cover, the lowest October temperatures to date were recorded in the night of the 25th, and partly also on the 26th in the Jura, and occasionally also in the Alpine valleys. For example, 17 degrees in Andermatt, 16 degrees in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and 12 degrees in Engelberg. The lowest temperature value was recorded at the La Brevine station with 26.2 degrees. With a daily maximum of 0.3 degrees, Zurich recorded the earliest ice day since 1882. The majority of the precipitation, which was heavy in some areas, fell in the first third of the month. The largest amounts of over 250% fell in the canton of Geneva, in the Alpstein region, in the lower Engadine, and in northern and central Grisons, where over 300% was recorded in the Davos area. Quantities of 200 to 250% were recorded in the central plateau east of the Emme, the central and eastern Prealps, the upper Engadine, the foothills of the Jura, and the western Jura. The Jura east of the Chasseron, the canton of Schaffhausen. The rest of the Central Plateau and the Alpine and Western pre-Alpine regions received between 150 and 200% of the normal amounts. In the Valais and Ticino, up to 150% of the norm was measured. The slightly above normal values in Ticino were only reached by the heavy south-falling precipitation at the end of the month. Almost all of Switzerland recorded only between 80 and 100% of the normal sunshine duration. At the beginning of the month, the shallow low over the Bay of Biscay with mild, humid sea air caused rainy weather on both sides of the Alps. On the 2nd, it was temporarily sunny and very warm throughout Switzerland. With temperatures of up to 22 degrees in the Central Plateau and up to 25 degrees in the Föhn areas, it was the warmest day of the month in the north. On the 3rd, a low-pressure system off the Norwegian coast expanded rapidly to the northeast. On its back, increasingly colder and very humid polar air flowed into the Alpine region, with winds shifting to the northwest. During the night of the 5th, the heavy precipitation turned into snow up to 800 meters. Subsequently, a strong northwesterly flow from the North Atlantic towards the Alps became dominant. After a sunny and clear day in the fresh polar air, a warm frontal occlusion reached the northern side of the Alps on the evening of the 6th and caused heavy precipitation, especially in the east. In the night of the 8th, a cold front accompanied by thunderstorms and gusts of up to 100 km/h crossed the northern side of the Alps. The snow line dropped to around 500 meters in eastern Switzerland. After a brief calm, a warm front hit the Alpine region in the evening. With intensive precipitation, the snow line rose rapidly to over 2,000 meters. In the course of the 9th, the precipitation quickly subsided. South of the Alps, it was mostly sunny with a northerly fen. With temperatures of 26 degrees, even a summer day was recorded in southern Ticino on the 9th. From the 10th onwards, a high-pressure system moved from the southwest, strengthening over Central Europe to southern Scandinavia. On the southern edge of this high, very sunny weather prevailed in the mountains with almost unrestricted visibility. High fog lay over the Central Plateau with an upper limit between 1,200 and 1,500 meters. A weak disturbance approaching from the southwest brought some precipitation to the Jura and western Switzerland in the night of the 14th. In the middle of the month, the high pressure extended to Eastern Europe. With increasing breezes, temperatures in the lowlands again dropped noticeably. The high fog, with its upper limit rising to 1,700 meters, also penetrated the large alpine valleys on the 15th and 16th. On the 18th, the high-pressure system over Central Europe quickly dissipated, but also continued to dominate the weather in the Alpine region on the following day. A low-pressure system moving northeast from Spain crossed Switzerland on the 20th. During the day, precipitation was concentrated in the west and south. This intensified in the evening with the influx of cold air from the rear, also in German-speaking Switzerland, and lasted until midday the following day. The snow line dropped to about 1,000 meters. Polar air intrusion. After a brief interlude of high pressure with quite sunny weather, another low moved from northern France to upper Italy on the 23rd. Cold polar air reached the northern side of the Alps from the north. During the night, precipitation fell as snow as far as Reichland. In the lowlands, 1 to 5 cm on the northern slopes of the Alps, and on the Jura heights 20 to 30 cm of fresh snow were measured. From the 24th onwards, the weather was again characterized by high pressure for 5 days. With temperatures well below normal, there was high fog over the lowlands. Above it was mostly sunny. On the 29th and 30th, two frontal systems of a low over the British Isles crossed Switzerland. On the 31st, a low moved from the Atlantic to western France, strengthening. In the course of the day, a strong phone developed over the Alpine region. On the phone-exposed summits, gusts reached 150 to 185 km/h. In the Föhn valleys, 110 to 125 km/h with temperatures of up to 19 degrees. On the southern side of the Alps, precipitation intensified massively. With hourly values of 6 to 13 millimeters, totals of 70 to 120 millimeters fell in Ticino by the time of the morning measurement on the 1st of November.
Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Zurich, Friday, 7th November 2003.
Early winter, a meter of snow in the Bronx.
With up to 40 centimeters of snow on the streets of New York, winter has arrived unexpectedly early in the USA. For the city, it was the first such heavy early onset of winter since 1900. New York. The snowfall began as early as Friday. A new record of up to half a meter of snow was measured in the Bronx. Authorities were also preparing for possible power outages. Many shops were sold out of snow removal supplies. "It's organized chaos here," said a vendor in Rhode Island. Hundreds of people came to his shop looking for snow shovels. In the northeastern United States, the first major snowfall over the weekend caused numerous traffic delays. 5 human beings died in accidents on icy roads in the states of New Jersey, Connecticut, and Virginia. Up to 60 centimeters of snow was forecast for parts of the East Coast. Thousands of air travelers were stranded for hours because of the snow. From Washington to Philadelphia and New York to Boston, airports reported problems with their runways. Boston International Airport was the hardest hit and had to be temporarily closed. In Washington, the initial snowfall was not as heavy, but it still upset President George W. Bush's travel plans. The president actually wanted to fly to a dinner in Baltimore, but the snowfall did not allow him to do so. So he traveled in a convoy of cars, which led to more traffic jams on the highway. Nevertheless, the dinner was a great success. It raised $1 million for Bush's campaign. Stop.
Der Landbote, Wintertour, Monday, 8th December 2003.
Sadly, this may be the case, and particularly in relation to bushfires and forest fires, as I said earlier.
Endless terror list.
Zurich. Actually, UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan should have started his speech before the terrorism conference today with a minute's silence. Yesterday, 2 Iraqi UN staff members and an Iraqi policeman were killed, and 19 other human beings were injured in a suicide attack on the UN headquarters in Baghdad. Not far from the scene, a first car bomb had killed 23 human beings in August, including the UN Special Envoy to Iraq. The casualty toll of terrorist attacks this year is depressing. In May, rebels carried out 2 suicide attacks in Chechnya that claimed a total of 80 human lives. Almost simultaneously, 34 human beings were killed in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and 41 victims were mourned in Casablanca just a week later. In July, an explosion in a mosque in Pakistan killed 53 human beings, and a little later a bomb exploded in the Marriott Hotel in Jakarta, Indonesia. All the groups that claimed responsibility for the above attacks said they were close to Al-Qaeda. In early August, the Jordanian embassy in Baghdad was the target of an explosive attack. Shortly afterwards, a bomb killed the Shia leader Mullah Muhammad Bakr al-Hakim in Karbala. 2 bombings in Bombay in August killed nearly 50 human beings, presumably for religious motives. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has claimed numerous attack victims since August. Europe narrowly escaped horror in early September when German authorities were able to prevent an attack planned by neo-Nazis at the laying of the foundation stone of the Munich synagogue in Time, RP.
Original newspaper article. Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, Tuesday, 23rd September 2003.
In the coming time, however, it will also be the case that the sun's radiation will penetrate to the geosphere due to the ozone layer damage in a much stronger manner than it does under normal conditions with an intact ozone layer. As a result, the entire flora and fauna is dangerously affected by droughts, with the small and large plants up to the level of trees drying up, while the animals die of thirst. Because of the great heat, the waters will also dry out, or become that warm that the water creatures, such as fish, etc., die, fall ill, waste away, and fall prey to death due to lack of water. But also the Earth human will, due to the intensified and unfiltered solar radiation, become afflicted by melanoma of the skin, which will cause many deaths, in addition to the fact that many human beings will also be afflicted to a great extent by solar allergies, which, like melanoma, are not of harmless nature.
Just as it has always been, both in terms of bush and forest fires, and also in terms of all the global natural disasters, the melanoma of the skin and the sun allergies, except that, according to your words, in the time to come, everything will increase enormously, and everything will get out of hand. But there is also the problem that many know-it-alls, such as doctors, professors, nutrition experts, and others who claim to know everything better, say that a lot of liquid has to be drunk when the temperature is high. In this regard, however, I have made quite different experiences, namely that at high temperatures only very little, and when you do, then only a little hot tea or coffee may be drunk, because any other liquid is immediately sweated out again, and accordingly the thirst increases further. Alcohol of any kind should not be drunk when the temperature is very high, because otherwise it can cause a circulatory breakdown and body heat buildup. In the Rhone Valley, 10,000 human beings are fleeing the floods. Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, Thursday, 4 December 2003. Hundreds of thousands of Japanese after earth tremors without electricity, chaos on road and rail, 500 injured in massive earthquakes. Der Landbot. Winterthur, Friday, 27. September 2003. The strongest weapon of terror. Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Sunday, 5. October 2003.
This is of rightness. Alcohol of any kind should be avoided under all circumstances when the temperature is high, as it can cause life-threatening reactions. The higher the heat temperatures rise, the less should be drunk. Too much fluid can be lethal because it washes out too many vital substances from the brain and body. Fuel tank fire at Hokkaido aftershock. Number of injured rising. The Landbot. Winterthur, Monday, 2020 September 2003. Fierce storms. Minor damages. Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, Toshing 22, December 2003. If you have to drink, then only hot beverages such as tea, coffee, or other equivalent things should be supplied to the body in small quantities. Sports. Too much water is unhealthy. Pulse tip. Zurich, September 2003. If the body is supplied with large amounts of fluid, in addition either cool or even cold, it is excreted again by the body in the form of sweating, or it ends in death. Drinking a lot is therefore not harmless, because by sweating also vital salts and converted vitamins as well as minerals and trace elements are excreted, which strongly impairs the body function and all organs, leads to death or to weakness attacks, malaise, listlessness, tiredness, nausea, fear, dizziness, or to all sorts of other effects, whereby those can also be life-threatening, for example in case of heat buildup, etc. In the north, the heat is only perceived as stronger by the human being because they are not very used to it, while the human beings in the south exhibit a better heat tolerance. This is because human beings in the northern hemisphere have a much thicker blood that flows through their veins with greater difficulty than is the case with human beings in the southern hemisphere, who have a much thinner blood that flows more easily through their veins. But human beings can change, namely by acclimatizing themselves. In order to acclimatize from south to north or from north to south, so that the blood becomes thicker or thinner, an average time of about half a year is required, after which the other climatic condition is well coped with.
Then I would like to address you again about the depression of which you once said, I do not remember when that was, that certain bacteria from horses and other animals can also cause depression in human beings, if there is a genetic predisposition to do so. Can you explain to me in a little more detail the meaning of such a predisposition?
The predisposition manifests itself as a gene anomaly, which is responsible for depression arising when, on the one hand, thought-feeling based and thus also psychic factors generate depressive facts. Protection against Depression. Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Mittwoch, 23. Juli 2003, kurzes Gen macht anfällig für Depressionen, Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Zürich, Mittwoch, 30. July 2003. It concerns those genes, one of them being long and the other short, which are responsible for the fact that the messenger substance serotonin reaches the brain in correct quantity through the so-called carriers. The genetic anomaly consists of a double gene arrangement of two genes of the same size, namely, two short genes. As a single gene, the short one produces less serotonin carriers than the long one, which means that fewer equalizing and mood-enhancing messenger substances enter the brain, leading to a susceptibility to depression. This is in contrast to the situation where two long genes are present in parallel, or both genes' variations are present in combination. However, the more serotonin reaches the brain, the more mood elevated a human being becomes. On the other hand, however, there are also bacterial forms found with a wide variety of plants and animals, which, if genetically susceptible people are infected by them, cause these human beings to develop depression. However, it is also a given in certain human beings that they are carriers of such a bacterium of depression and can pass it on to those fellow human beings who are genetically susceptible to it. In these cases, the aforementioned genes are influenced by the bacterium in such a wise that they are inhibited in their function.
How frequent are such gene anomalies, which could also be called DNA anomalies, right? And serotonin is, after all, the messenger substance that is responsible for the good mood and the elevated sentiment of the human being, as you yourself have mentioned. But it is probably also the case that the human beings themselves always decide by their view and attitude, etc., whether their genetic predisposition is allowed to come into play or not, by which I mean that they very well have the might to keep depressions or any particular symptoms of illness under control, or even to avoid them if they behave healthily and properly in relation to their world of thoughts and feelings. By this I mean that, in terms of depression and certain symptoms of illness, it is the same as with the horoscopic cosmic and galactic swinging waves by which the human being is hit. Depending on how he or she relates to these swinging waves, how he or she interprets them, they generate their negative or positive effect accordingly. In other words, if a human being believes in the nonsense of an idiotic horoscope that was created by someone who does not understand horoscopy, then the nonsense actually occurs because the human being, in his or her irrational belief in it, works towards it. If, however, the matter is viewed and considered in a completely neutral wise, then also something neutral results from it. Therefore, the human being always decides for oneself about one's own well-being and woe, just as in relation to depression, even if there is a genetic predisposition for it. Is that right, or do I go wrong about it?
Your questions can be answered with yes. Also, with regard to the well-being and woe, you view the whole correctly. In relation to the gene formations of the aforementioned and other types, both parents are fundamentally determinant. As far as the frequency of the gene anomaly is concerned, however, it must be said that it occurs relatively often to a greater or lesser extent in many of the entire humankind of the earth. In very many cases, the depression is not perceived as such at all, but is only attributed to a psychical bad mood. However, really extremely severe acute depressions remain within a tolerable range in terms of numbers. Gene anomalies that fundamentally lead to depression are such that they respond to life situations and conditions, as well as to bacterial forms, etc. That is to say, thus both love and hatred, anxiety, fear, vice, greed, stinginess, sorrows and grief, addictions, loneliness, sociability, belief, loss, gain, and insecurity, as well as inhibitions and illness or injuries, etc., can be the triggers. But depression also has various other causes, which can be thousandfold, and not all of them can be comprehended.
Understood. Your answer is sufficient. Thank you. Anxiety and fear are two different things, but unfortunately this cannot be understood and distinguished by many people. Therefore, I would now like to ask you about it. For that purpose, I would also like to try to explain the whole matter myself, to which you can correct me if I say something wrong. Well then, to be correct, one has to distinguish between anxiety and fear, because they fundamentally represent two different factors. Fear is a state triggered by something indefinite and unknown, while anxiety is a state towards something definite. Expressed differently, it means that fear is a product of thoughts and feelings arising from diffuse imaginations, from illusions and fantasies, for example in relation to death, etc. Anxiety, on the other hand, is based on thoughts and feelings that are based on real things, such as sounds, dangerous objects, the knowledge of an impending or to be suffered punishment, for example in the form of prison. Other factors are, however, also torture, rape, hatred, addiction, lovelessness, financial penalties or being beaten, etc., as well as scolding and other things and situations, etc., which are already recorded in the memory. Both anxiety and fear have in this context an enormous range of thoughts and feelings as well as emotions, which can be very weak as well as very strong, and may even reach all the way to panic. And both anxiety and fear are not only characteristic of human beings, but also animals, birds and fish, etc., which dispose of an instinct consciousness, and thus also of a certain ability to remember. Is that correct like that?
Everything said is correct. If I may still add the following to this, anxiety by no means has anything to do with cowardice or hysteria. As you rightly said, anxiety and fear must be strictly distinguished. Your explanation for this is very good. For all life forms that have a conscious or instinctive consciousness, the reactions of anxiety and fear are contained in the depths of the brain. We are dealing here with states of thoughts, feelings, and the psyche, which form a complex biological program. The stimulus that triggers anxiety or fear, we want to refer to human beings in this context, races with the speed of light into the thoughts, so that it is not at all realized by human being, and even cannot be captured by any highly sensitive measuring devices. And at the same speed, Impulses are racing out of the unconscious and imperceptible, rapidly emerging thoughts, which directly stimulate a neuronal circuit to start functioning. With an acoustic stimulus, for example, the circulation runs from the ears into the limbic system, which is located between the cerebral cortex and the brainstem. There, in the amygdala, known to you as the almond core, anxiety and fear are activated in tiny fractions of a second by the stimulus of unconscious and imperceptible, fast-as-light flash thoughts. The almond core, consisting of a small almond-shaped accumulation of neurons, has the characteristic and ability to put the entire organism of the human being into a highly sensitive alert state and to cause a tension of anxiety or fear. The almond core cooperates with another factor of the nearby brain center, namely the hippocampus, in which memories, living experiences, situations, and experiences are stored like in an archive. These are with the speed of light compared with the current threat, or actually with what is regarded as an acute threat. However, the whole process is not consciously perceived by the human being, because the conscious realization of the anxiety or the fear only manifests itself once hormonal signals emanating from the almond core trigger the anxiety reaction or fear reaction like a torrent. Put in different words, the following happens. The almond core sends the instruction, that is to say, impulse to the hypothalamus, to release the corticotropin-releasing hormone. This hormone, called CRH for short, causes the stimulation of the pituitary gland as well as the adrenal glands, through which they otherwise release adrenaline as well as noradrenaline and cortisol. But these are not the only processes, because there are several other hormonal factors at play during the whole exercise, although it would go too far to explain them. But what ultimately results from everything is that the gastric blood vessels constrict and the digestive processes cease, the heart begins to race, whereby the blood circulation is stimulated. In addition, a bristling up of the hair takes place. The blood pressure rises, which increases alertness and readiness for action. The breathing becomes faster, whereby the body can act better, because it gets more oxygen. Anxiety sweat and sweaty hands are further consequences, because the blood flow to the skin is reduced in order to supply the muscles as well as the arms and legs with more blood. The liver provides a high plus in energy by ensuring that more sugar gets into the blood. Those, my friend, are the facts I can elaborate on in relation to your question.
Then I have one more question concerning Venus. In March 1982, the Soviet spacecraft Venera 14, which was decorated with a Lenin plaque, actually was on Venus and radioed its measurement data to Earth for exactly 57 minutes, after which it was then destroyed by the enormous pressure and the 450 degrees heat. This made it known that planet Venus, the evening star, is extremely hostile to life, even though the Romans considered it to be the goddess of love. As far as I know, namely through your lectures, the hostility to life on the surface of Venus refers only to life known to Earth scientists, because according to your information, thermobacteria, and in high layers at a height of about 50 kilometers, still other microorganic life forms truthfully exist on the planet. The Venus atmosphere at this altitude is no longer 450 degrees of heat, but only 30 to 75 or 80 degrees, while the pressure is no longer stronger than on the Earth's surface. Well, in the high atmospheric layers there are, always according to your explanations, microorganisms that produce hydrogen sulfide as well as carbonyl sulfide, a gas that is excreted by the microorganisms as waste, if I have understood correctly. In addition, microorganisms can survive and reproduce both in the cold, up to the absolute zero, as well as in the heat of thousands and millions of degrees. Now the question, What do these microorganisms, that is to say bacteria on Venus, actually feed on? Could it be any gases or acids, etc., as is partly also the case with other microorganisms?
Your explanations all correspond to the rightness, thus also in relation to the cold resistance and the heat resistance of certain bacteria. World Champion in Survival Limitaler Tagblatt, Baden, Friday, 25 August 2003. Surviving at 130 degrees Celsius Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, Saturday, 16th August 2003. The diet of the microorganisms consists of carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide. And furthermore, they also make use of the solar radiation and the low concentrations of water in the atmosphere of Venus.
Microorganisms also exist in our Earth's atmosphere and in the clouds, namely both in the water particles and in the ice crystals. These microorganisms living so high above are tremendously resistant to cold, heat, and UV radiation, and reproduce constantly in these high atmospheric layers, as I had already learned from Svath as a boy in 1948. He told me at that time that they were different microorganisms, that is to say bacteria, that is to say microbes, which, like marine plankton, would reproduce periodically every 7 days, at least certain types of these microorganisms. And as on Earth, certain microorganisms have penetrated the atmosphere of Venus from outer space, while the majority of them originated on the planet itself, when it at the earliest times still carried water, which however was also impregnated from outer space by bacteria-carrying comets, asteroids, and microorganism clouds. Later on, the water then evaporated.
That is of rightness.
Do you have any more time? Because I have a few more questions.
There is no rush, for today is my day off.
Fine. Then the following. If I remember correctly, it was in 1948 that I was allowed to go with Svath on a trip to headhunters somewhere in the north or northeast of India, because I was interested in the life of headhunters at that time. It was sometime in spring or so, and as Svath said, it was forbidden by the Indian government to go into that area unless you had a special permit. But according to Svath's explanation, it was practically impossible to get one. Of course, we did not mingle with the headhunters, but hovered deep and invisibly above their huts, so that I could observe everything closely. Svath and I stood outside on the hovering platform of his pear-ship, and could in this manner also overhear everything, saw the whole turmoil, and heard the screams of the headhunters. Suddenly everything became completely quiet, and then suddenly shrill cries shattered the silence, followed by an almost devilish laughter. As Svath said, this was the sign of the beginning of the beheading of captured enemies waiting for their end in a dedicated hut on the village hill. Several half-naked young men of the village swung spears and stormed up to the prisoner's hut to kill the prisoners who had entrenched themselves there. However, their undertaking was senseless, because the young headhunters hit the defenders with large machetes, only to suddenly separate their heads from their bodies with a single enormous stroke of the heavy machetes, which were then picked up by the young and blood-spattered headhunters under the frenetic howls of the villagers and swung around as a trophy. The blood of the beheaded people just splattered around, and in fact I felt pukey and almost had to vomit afterwards. According to Svath's explanation, there were about 36 numerically large headhunting tribes in that area at that time, who often fought feuds with each other and considered the heads of their enemies cut off as trophies of prestige for the warriors and their tribe. Many dozens of the naked skulls were kept on special roofed wooden racks, as I saw myself. And indeed, in those years many human beings were still robbed of their heads by these headhunters, especially when downright slaughter feasts took place, as Svath explained to me. The beheading of the prisoners in spring, however, was not an actual act of war by the headhunters, but a religious ritual to achieve an increase in the fertility of the women in fields. This was done by beheading the prisoners in a sham fight, whereby the unfortunate ones only had primitive shields for defense, but no weapons. By beheading the prisoners, Svath explained to me, Their life energy was sacrificed, that is to say, consecrated to the fertility, completely according to a long-standing religious ritual. And as Svath explained, young men of the headhunting tribes also had to prove their manhood, that is to say, maturity, by separating the head from the body of an enemy with a deliberate stroke, whereby the life power of the killed passed over to the villagers. This is because in the belief of the headhunters, the imagination rumbled that the life power, or the essence of life, would be anchored in the head, which is why the killer, after knocking off the head of an enemy, then brought this life power back to a holy place in the village, from where the power then passed over to the whole village community, as well as to all its possessions and to the women and fields. Thus, a head cut off from an enemy was regarded as a reason for a bloody dance feast, as well as a means of gaining a high reputation, but also as a consecrated sacrifice for the fertility, a good harvest, and a lucky charm for the headhunters with regard to good chances with the women. Moreover, young men were only allowed to procreate their own children when they had proved their own fertility, which happened precisely by beheading an enemy in an act of war, or indeed a prisoner. My encounter dates now just over 40 years back, but even today I am still bothered by what I saw and experienced back then. Although I have no psychic problems or the like with it, however, everything is still of such a memory to me that I almost see it in front of me when I think of it. Truthfully, I have seen many deaths, digested and coped with them, and never created lasting psychic problems for myself with them, because these deaths always had very specific stories and forms, which were to be accepted and understood. But the encounter with the headhunters was something completely different, because the ones who were killed were defenseless and could not protect themselves. Rather, they were literally slaughtered as a result of a religious delusion. That is the thing I cannot accept. It is true, I was still very young at that time, just 11 years old, and it was my own wish that Svath let me see what I had lived through. But I was already able to cope with it well then. But I really could not accept it. And indeed not to this day, because killing defenseless people, as is also the case with the statutory death penalty, means nothing more and nothing less than a murderous slaughter. It was certainly no mistake of Svath to let me watch everything, quite the contrary, because I am still very grateful to him today. Because I learned a lot from it about the human inner nature, which I would certainly never have learned in my lifetime, and which helped me a lot in my life and strengthened me in my mission. But I just cannot accept the actions of the headhunters, nor the statutory death penalty, and I will never be able to do that. Certainly, I get along very well with foreign customs and traditions and never had any difficulties with them, because I could always accept them. But the headhunting and the death penalty are something else, because the whole thing corresponds in any case only to an unacceptable religious delusion and murder, which never have a right to exist. But the reason I am telling you all this is because, on one hand, I want to ask you if you know anything about this story of my encounter, and if it is possible for you to once again bring me to the place where it happened. I would be interested to know how things look today.
Your encounter is familiar to all of us. The headhunters of Nagaland, the Naga warriors, as they are called, no longer practice the bloody headhunting tradition in an open form, but in very rare cases only in an utmost secret manner, which may, however, change at any time because the old rituals are secretively still alive. If you nevertheless want to visit that area and the tribe secretly, because we would also have to do it secretly today, then I am gladly prepared to fulfill your wish. If you like, we could fly there next Friday afternoon. But you have to be aware that it is still officially forbidden to enter Nagaland, and that we cannot allow ourselves to be seen by the inhabitants.
Nevertheless, if you have time, then I would like to go, that is to say, fly there again.
Then so be it.
However, that doesn't mean that you want to leave now, does it? Because I still have several questions.
There is no rush, as I have already explained. So if you have any more questions, then just bring them up.
That makes me happy. Thank you. It is always said that vegetarians and vegans are supposed to live longer than non-vegetarians who eat meat and other animal products. But as I know the whole matter from experience, there is no difference in this regard. In addition, I view the matter in such a manner that the human being is fundamentally an omnivore, and not a grain picker who only eats grain, vegetables, fruits, berries, and salad. Furthermore, it can often be detected with human beings how they nourish themselves. So meat and animal product eaters usually have a healthy skin color as well as an opaque, firm skin, while vegetarians and vegans often have a skin that somehow appears translucent and afflicted with disease. Although it cannot be denied that meat and animal product-free food in the form of cereals, vegetables, fruit and salad, etc. is healthy. However, a diet limited to these substances does not provide the body with all the necessary vitamins, trace elements, minerals, enzymes, and proteins, etc. that it needs, which is why certain deficiency symptoms emerge. Since the human digestive system is designed in such a manner that it absorbs and processes everything, it also requires a mixed diet, which means that it needs meat and other animal products as well as fruit, lettuce, vegetables, and berries, etc., in order to function properly. Also the salt, the sugar, and the fat must not be forgotten in this context, because these food products too are of necessity, even if only in a moderate form, so that not too many calories are taken up, because these lead in unreasonable quantities to obesity and reduce life expectancy, as already Svath taught me. Do you have any further cognitions in this regard? Karl-Heinz Collins, Saarbrücken. Do vegetarians really live longer? PM, Munich, September 2000.
Well, you have mentioned the main facts, but I would still like to say the following about it. There is no difference between meat and animal product eaters, as well as those that eat only fruits, vegetables, berries, grapes, salads, roots, juices, and all kinds of other vegetable products. This means that the latter do not live any longer than eaters of meat and animal products. During the whole process of eating, it is only important that the food is not consumed in exaggerated quantity and not too fat-containing. The less animal fat there is in the diet, the less chance there is of contracting obesity or all sorts of diseases, such, for example, cancer, heart disease, biliary, liver or kidney problems, etc. If fat is thus only consumed in a moderate way, there is no difference with regard to the mortality of both groups. Meat from bred animals contains, as a rule, much more fat than is the case with wild animals, in whose meat more unsaturated fatty acids are given, which are of enormous importance as well as very valuable for the human being. It is therefore of enormous importance that animal fats are consumed as little as possible in terms of nutrition, because, among other things, they are extremely high in calories and further obesity, and thereby also damage the health. It must be taken into consideration that in the digestive system, the food is burned to energy, that is to say, converted into energy, whereby the so-called free radicals develop, which can attack and influence the genome as well as the cells in an extremely harmful way.
A kind of continuous fasting is therefore beneficial to health and life prolonging. With continuous fasting, I refer in this context to not eat senselessly, but eating only small portions with decency, whereby of course all necessary substances such as vitamins, enzymes, minerals, proteins, and trace elements, etc., must be contained in the food or separately supplied to the body. My rule for this is that when I eat, I only consume as much food as it agrees with me. Consequently, I stop eating when I could still eat something, and there is still a slight feeling of hunger.
This is the way of rightness.
Well, then the following. Spartacus was a warrior for the oppressed. Despite all ancient reports, his origin is still unknown today, as is his death. It is said that he died in the Battle of the River in 71 BC, but his body was never found. The Romans had united all their military legions in this battle, and thereby defeated the army of Spartacus. As punishment for the slave revolt, the victors then crucified more than 6,000 defeated slaves, namely along the Via Appia from Capua to Rome. In Capua, too, was the gladiator school, run by a certain Gnaeus Lentulus Batiatus, where Spartacus also learned his gladiator craft, before it came to an uprising in the spring of 73 BC by a few more than 200 gladiators in Capua when they stormed the prison kitchen, armed with all sorts of things they could just get their hands on. So the prison itself became the arena. I know some things about Spartacus, but if you know more about it, then please let me hear.
Indeed, I know quite a few things. So listen then. The term gladiator is based on the main combat tool of gladiators, the sword, which was called gladius in Latin language.